So go ahead and record this. So this is Tomika's resume. So one thing we had done in sort of previous presentations, presented our own lean journeys. And this was something that Tomika presented for hers. So the objective here, as we talk about what do we want to try to get across, we have 2 hours with a bunch of managers and admin people from across these systems. What do we want to talk about? There's maybe 40 to 50 people going to be in the audience here. We want to be able to sort of identify universal challenges impacting higher education. So what are the problems that we're dealing with? One of the overall concepts here that we talked about is there's a challenge in getting people to say that they want to implement lean. Now, this is a little bit of a sort of name change. We say, okay, well, instead of implementing lean, what if we call it service excellence? You know, it's really hard for people to reject out of hand. We want to have excellent service in our internal organizations, our payroll organizations, our student service organizations. What if we go for service excellence as a thing that we target? And what Tomika has come up with is this idea is, well, one of the best ways to achieve service excellence is to focus on systematic problem solving. Let's just say that to get service excellence, we're not going to do lean, we're going to do Six Sigma, we're just going to solve problems. Now, one of the things there is a lot of the ways that we go about solving problems, we're going to use a lot of the tools and things that you're looking at, but we're not necessarily going to talk about it that way in order to get people on board. We're kind of, sneak it in the back way to get this stuff in. So we're going to talk about, applying scientific thinking to solve problems, and we're going to have to get, communicate the value of this approach and try to get buy-in from the stakeholders or the people that are hearing about this concept. So that's a little bit about what this two-part presentation is about. And I guess the other thing, so we've observed there's a few different paths, for bringing in lean. What Tomika and I and a lot of us have been involved in, when we go into an organization, we say, okay, we want to help you, as opposed to talking about it as a problem, we talk about it as a process analysis. So the first thing we do is say, okay, we're going to map the process. We're going to do a side hoc. We're going to do evaluated, non-evaluated map, and kind of walk through this big sort of mapping process. And that's part of the problem is it's too big, right? It's a little too daunting for people. You said, well, let's just talk about problems, and maybe that's a way to make this happen. So some of the case for change we're trying to justify is why is this important? So we do in our project charters, we do things like business cases. This is kind of our business case. These are some of the things that we're facing within the CSU and higher education in California. Rising debt burden on students and families, flattening revenue streams, growing perception of higher ed, investment value that we need to be investing in this. So that's a business case. Talk about some of the benefits of change or going to this service excellence model, right? Enhanced reputation for success, increased client student satisfaction, an engaged and motivated workforce, improved operational efficiencies, greater return on investment. Those are the benefits that we think going this route can provide. Now, getting started, there's sort of an overview of what a lean model or might look like. One of the ones that you guys have already been exposed to, DMAIC process might be a model. The Toyota production system might be a model, and this really sort of reflects probably more on a Toyota production system model, which says there needs to be some foundational sort of ideas, the idea of a challenge, systematic improvement, teamwork, respect for and developing people. There's a sort of a long-term philosophy that we're trying to engender. This is not short-term fixes. Let's make these permanent, long-term plays. It's not about quarterly results. It's about what are the results over the 5, 10, 20-year horizon. We've already sort of talked a lot about focusing on process and flowing value to the customer. We're trying to engage people in problem solving. We've talked a lot about that in class. And ultimately, we're trying to say, okay, problem solving is where we need to get to. So if we can put, some of these ideas in place, what we really want to do is we want to get people and processes and the whole system focusing on a problem solving type approach. So here's what we're proposing for a problem solving approach. Now, in this class, we've been learning about the DMAIC process. So the DMAIC process is essentially fundamentally a problem solving process. We define the problem, we figure out how to measure the problem, we analyze to find the root cause of the problem, we come up with some potential countermeasures or solutions or improvements to the problem, and then on the control side, we figure out, well, how do we lock in those improvements? This is simply another sort of problem-solving approach. This is reflective of a thing we call A3 problem solving. And does anybody know what an A3 is? Is that, besides from my team up front, anybody know what A3? Anybody know what so if I said that A3 was just simply a paper size, what's a paper size of this, an A3? Paper size? So European paper size, how big is it? What's the US equivalent? It's not 8.5 by 11. Yeah, it's like 8.4 or something. So an A3 is essentially what we would call like a tabloid size. So it's 11 by 17. And what Toyota and some other people are doing lean is saying, okay, we can take an 11 by 17 piece of paper and we can put not only our analysis of the problem and what the justification and root cause is, but we're also going to put in the plan and how we're going to solve that problem. All on one 11 by 17 sheet of paper, right? Which is actually two 8.5 by 11. So here's your 11 by 17, right? So 11 by 17, 11 by 17. So on the one side, it's your analysis. The other side is your plan, how you're going to fix it. Now, there are different formats for A3 problem solving, different sections. Tomika's had some experience and she's proposed this. I'm usually used to a 7-step A3 problem solving. We teach that in our MBA classes. And we also teach it in the 403 advanced leads. So it's like a 7-step process, but you can get 9-step processes. This happens to be an 8-step process, okay? So you're looking for like, what's the ideal state that you're trying to go for? Where are you at currently, right? What's the gap? So the difference between ideal versus current is a gap that we need to identify. That's our problem. What's our stretch targets, or what are we gonna shoot for? You might have a gap that's this wide, but our stretch target is only to fix this much. Gap is this, we fix less, or maybe we fix more. What's the actual target we're going for? Root cause problem solving. This is the kind of thing that we do in the analyze phase, the DMAIC process. What are the countermeasures? So lean folks generally talk about countermeasures. DMAIC folks talk about improvements, or Six Sigma folks talk about improvements. It's the same thing. One of the reasons why lean people talk about countermeasures is we don't believe you ever get a solution. Think about continuous improvement, right? You can put something in place that kind of gets us to the next level, but it's not permanent, right? It's not a permanent solution or improvement. It's a countermeasure. Sounds more technical, I don't know. We're stuck with it. You monitor, right? So whatever the fixes we've done, we check and make sure that they work. Did we actually achieve our target or not? And then the standardize, that's a control piece, right? We say, okay, how do we lock in? How do we share the best practices, the improvements across? So this is essentially an 8-step problem-solving process. This is what we want people to use to achieve service excellence in their organization. Okay? And we want them to use it on small problems and also on big problems. So Tamika's going to walk through a sort of a simple sort of thing where we're looking at, an observation. John is often late to work. Impact, John's not available to see his assigned clients. Action, we're going to apply scientific thinking to solve, John's target this problem. And we'll take him through that 8-step process to figure out how to fix this problem with John. Okay? So that's in an hour. That's where Tomika's gonna bring them, and then at that point, I'm gonna take over. We were talking about, well, how do we now reinforce this? And because certainly Cal Poly and me and all you guys are big, learn by doing advocates. We said, well, let's actually take all these managers who are in this room. Let's take them through the problem-solving process on a common problem that we're looking at. And so what I'm going to do is, let me switch over to my slide set. Because should have combined both of these. So let me do it. Stop share. Share. Let's go back to part 1, part 2. There we go. All right, so I'm sharing this. Part 2. Let's go ahead and slideshow beginning. Okay, because these people are going to get a 20 or 30-minute break between, there's a little bit of repeat in here to bring back up to where we're here. So we said the thing we're going to look at, and I think all these managers are going to have this challenge is when they go back to the organizations after hearing this presentation, they're going to say, well, how do I get started? How do I do this, right? How do I make service excellence through problem solving? How do I get that on track in my university or where I am? I've modified the question a little bit. You guys are going to help me practice because I've never done this particular problem before. I'm a little bit, because my A3 is a 7-step and Tomika's is an 8-step, I got to get comfortable with using her problem-solving process. And you guys are going to help me do that. So we're going to quickly go through a little problem-solving exercise, and I'm hoping to get through this in like 10 minutes. Right? We won't be able to do this as completely as maybe we should or could, we'll go ahead and do that. Right? So, cell phone people. I'm just gonna, and then so I modified the question. So rather than having managers think about it, I think it's interesting, and this could be part of the overall challenge for the CSUs and UCs. We got students, right? We got campuses from 50,000 down to 19 or 20 or however many we currently have. And so I think an interesting question is, how can we engage students in achieving service excellence through systematic problem solving right here at Cal Poly? How can we do that? So that's a question, and that's a challenge I would put forward. And so what I'm going to do now is we're going to walk through, and you guys are going to help me with this problem. I'm going to do a little drawing on this whiteboard. I think we'll be in sort of small screen mode. That's what we've got. And I'm going to ask you, and we could get people that can raise their hand online or type information into the chat room. We'll try to pull this forward and capture this. Is this whiteboard right in the right distance back, or what? Bring it up just a little bit. Bring it up just a little bit. So one thing on my A3. So if I assume this is my tabloid size 11 by 17 piece of paper, or a lot of times when I problem solve when we're working with groups, I'll do like 1 flip chart per question. So I expect when we're doing this down in UC Riverside, we'll have a bunch of blank walls up there, and we're going to do there'll be 8 flip charts on the wall with the name of each one of these problem solving things, and that's where we're going to capture the information by working with these managers. But then, you know, hopefully that can then be translated into an 11 by 17 and we can communicate. But I'm going to say the title for this is, where's my 5S marker people? Okay, so I'm gonna send this up to you. Everybody have their safety glasses on? That was gonna go in. I think that was perfect. But I would throw that out if I were you. Oh. Yeah, that was the deal. Okay. Let's switch to, I don't like to read. Let me get it. Yeah, one of the feedback things that we'll do at the end of the year was people said, don't use red markers when I'm marking the board and stuff. So I always try to use black now. But I want to put down, the title here is Engage Students in Service Excellence Problem Solving. Right? Let's start on this. And let's go ahead and see. So, ideal state. So that's my first section. So if I wanted to envision once we had students engaged in problem solving, what would that look like? Somebody give me some bullet points. What would that look like? If I had sort of achieved students in problem solving and trying to help us achieve certain, what would it do? What would that look? Give me some bullets on what that would look like. Yeah. So I'd have very independent students. Right, so maybe that would be students, I like that. So maybe students are no longer so dependent on the bureaucracy of the system because they solve their way around it. Or they work so effectively with what it is because they've solved all problems and so they're more independent. Yeah, what else would that look like? Yeah, okay, students want to make a difference. So if I talk to students, they might say, hey, let's solve this problem. Let's make a difference. Let's change things, right? So students want to make a difference, right? Okay, so that's some examples. We would, we'd maybe sort of stretch that out on the top. Whoop. We'd stretch that out, in the time available. We'd sort of flesh that out. But the idea here is I want to get a picture of where I'm going, right, as far as making that happen, so I can communicate that. So what's the current state? What's the current state? Now I can flip those around and say, well, students are dependent and students are, don't want to make a difference, but I don't think that's really the case, right? Where are we at? What do we, what kind of things would I say here?
Well, I guess like kind of where all the students want to make a difference. I guess like just there's no direction.
No direction. Okay, so we lack direction. I like that. What else? Yeah, what else about this?
Students are just generally unaware of the goal.
Yeah, unaware of the goal. And that's kind of related to the lack of direction, right? Okay. What else? What else do we know about? You guys are in the current state. This is the Gimba right here, right? We're all sort of working and studying at Cal Poly. What else about this? What else? Give me, so when I look at the current state, there is a tendency to get a bunch of negative things, right? Lack of direction, unaware of goal. What are some of the good things that I could leverage off of in my current state? Yeah.
Students do want to help.
Okay, so there's a desire to help, right? And I need to tap into that desire. And I'm gonna kind of give you guys right? Students, right? So, you know, let's recognize, you know, we're not working with dummies. We're not working with people that only have a third grade education. You guys are pretty accomplished, right? So more, other comment on this?
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe like currently performing above average compared to like maybe some other schools.
Yeah, so you know, I don't know what the graphic might be to help communicate, but I would not shy back from the current state from putting in, you know, some bar graph that shows Cal Poly students versus other students or something like that to ideally like this is what I'm working with, all right? So that'd be an example of a current state situation. What's the gap or problem? So what's the gap or problem? All right, so let me just read this. What is the gap between the value expected as delivered versus expected versus delivered to the client? So if this is what the client wants, independent students who want to make a difference, that's the ideal state. And I've currently got, you know, lack of direction, unaware of goal, but a desire to help, and I've got bright students. How can I sort of condense that into a problem statement or bring that down into a discussion of a gap? Yeah. Okay, could be lack of communication. Right? Lack of communication. So I think that's good because unawareness of the goal and a lack of direction, there's definitely a communication component that can maybe envelop or summarize, you know, that part of the gap. What else? Anything else? Okay, let's go ahead and move on. One thing when I'm doing this and I'm working with a group, and you can do this, you know, from a facilitation technique, I always write down everything that people say, right? So if you're saying things, if they're, you know, super bright or they're, you know, marginal or whatever, I'm putting them down because we also have the right, because we're involved in the problem solving process, we also get to be the editors of that process. So at some point we say, you know what, you know, once we're down here, this, you know, it turns out, you know, that desire to help, you know, really wasn't there. You know, later on we sort of say, you know, we think about it, you know, it really wasn't, you know, part of it. And I'm not saying that's true. It's probably not true, but I can go back and I can cross things out and we can sort of focus in on what the right thing is. So we got to take this lack of communication. Maybe that's a good description of the problem. We can test that. We can, you know, have some brainstorming around that, right? What's the stretch target? So we want to get closer to the ideal of the perfect state. Let's go ahead and put here a stretch target. And I might want to practice on this, and I think, you know, from the things I've learned in this class about the measure portion, you know, let's try to, you know, how would we quantify this? How would we sort of describe this? So if the problem of the gap is lack of communication, how would we measure that? How would we measure that? Let's start with the measure. How do you measure that? Lack of communication. Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna, so instances. So incident communications. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, could be also not necessarily like the students don't feel like they're being communicated to the right way necessarily. Because like I mean, they could be like sending emails and stuff like that, but like a lot of people don't necessarily read those emails. So like maybe like a survey or something to like see like how students feel about like communication.
Yeah. So as we sort of talk about, well, how would we measure this? We might come up with, I don't know what instances of communications, like how many different people did you talk to today? And I'm going through I do a survey on a typical day. How many people do you talk to? How many of those are peers? How many of those are professors? How many of those are administrators? And we can maybe get a feel for that. And once we know, what that was, and maybe we have to do that measurement here in the current state, we come over here and we say, we want to have people have a minimum of average of 3 contacts per day, right? And we probably have to do a little operational definition around what that is, or how big, what's a contact? Is it email? Is it face-to-face? There have to be some definition around that. But I'm going to say that's my stretch goal is to make sure that people have this 3 contacts per day, right? Let's see. So coming down, root cause. Okay, so what's the root cause of our problem? So I'm coming back to this lack of communication. Let's go with how we figure out what the root cause is. Yeah, or if you just want to tell us the answer, that's fine too.
I'm going to say effective communication. Effectively communicating to all the students, the goals.
Okay, is effectiveness in sort of or is that a better definition of lack of a question? Is lack of effective communication? Or like, where would you? I'm thinking that's sort of like an insert as opposed to like the root cause.
I mean, a reason for performance is that I guess it's better.
Okay, well, so one way I would do is one of the things that we're learning about here is a fishbone diagram, right? And a fishbone has a very sort of typical way to do this might be man, machine, method, man, machine, method, materials, and usually there's another one called environment. Or some people call it Mother Nature, so you can have everything can begin with an M. But I might do this. I might put this lack of communication as the sort of the head of my fish here, right? And I would take your thing of effectiveness. Effectiveness might be a function of the methods that we're using, right? So coming off a method, there might be like an effectiveness component. Right, it's going to affect, or effectiveness effects, but it's going to come in here and cause whether we've got a lack of communication or not, right? So one of the things might be to, come in here for root cause, and we would sort of do our little fishbone analysis, and we would decide that, well, the thing here is, and I'm an older person, so I'll throw out the old person pet peeve, right? Too much electronics, right? So we're not doing enough face-to-face. We're too much, on our cell phones or texting and whatnot back and forth. This is what I'm going to say is sort of my root cause or the instance I'm looking at, okay? Let's take a look. So countermeasures. What kind of countermeasures can I put in place? Right, and this is another going to brainstorm. So what are some potential countermeasures I could put in place for this? If the problem is too much electronics, what are the countermeasures I can do? They don't have to be the ones we pick. We're going to brainstorm a list of 100, and we're going to, yeah. Okay, so we can talk to classes. Right, that's kind of a solution orientation there. Right? What else can we do? What else? other things. So if electronics, too much electronics is part of the cause. So what kind of countermeasures should we have for that? Talk to classes. What else can I do? I'm just gonna, let's go ahead and send some text messages. Right, we'll send a text message to everybody. Everyone's, stop, think, talk to somebody, right? You can have as opposed to, there's a lion sighted in Cal Poly Canyon. You have a little message that goes by, put on your cell phone every once in a while. Right, whatever that is. Okay, so we can brainstorm some countermeasures. How can we get the effectiveness of this communication up? And then we'd have to sort of monitor that, right? So what kind of things do I do for monitor? What kind of things do I do for monitor? What do you think? Are we getting any online folks sort of chiming in the chat room or anything? Okay. Just coasting along. A little free rider problem sometimes, but yeah, go ahead.
Follow-up surveys.
Do follow-up surveys. Great. So some of the survey stuff that we're doing, we're going to go down here and we're going to go ahead and repeat those, right? I'm going to see, well, did it go up or down? Are people communicating more or less? Are those personal contacts, are we hitting our 3 per day level? So we're going to monitor that for a while. If we're not hitting the target, maybe we're going to adjust. We're going to go back and sort of tweak our plan. Maybe we're talk to classes, twice, once in the beginning of class and again at the end. I don't know what that might be, but we can tweak it and try to get that to improve. And then standardize. So standardize, what's working that should be standardized and institutionalized throughout the organization. So what would that look like? What would that look like? Standardized, yeah. Yeah, so we look at what works, right? We have some monitoring of what the effectiveness is, and really, in other words, is sort of we could use in here, we're going to identify, best practices. What are those best practices, and we're going to go ahead and share those back out so everybody sort of knows. Maybe we're going to give like awards. Right? And maybe there's like a communicator of the quarter award that we're going to give out to people. We're going to give scholarships, for people that work on communication and develop better ways to communicate. So this is an example of a sort of a problem-solving process that we would go through in order to, achieve service excellence. So if we're trying to spread service excellence or, lean throughout the Cal State universities, we would teach people how to do this and how to use this on small problems and big problems. It's not only a way to help solve problems, but also a way to document, what you've done. And once you've sort of documented this, the sharing and the standardization works a little better. But that's what we're about. Hopefully I do a decent job and it starts the ball rolling down with a few organizations and some light bulbs go off. Any questions at this point?
Hi, Eric. This is Tomika. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Tomika. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Great job.
I'm going to stop share here. So Tomika, was there? So you got any kind of feedback? I appreciate the compliment, but any kind of insight? So how many students we have online now?
71.
Yeah. So it's about 100 students total, and maybe this is a little bit of where we start working our way to problem solve our way to service excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any kind of insight you wanted to add to what I said or did?
The only thing, I didn't hear the beginning of your presentation, and you may have already covered some of these things, but I would just suggest that even though the model looks very linear, it's just the idea that it's a repetitive process of plan, do, check, act, and that we're part of pursuing that excellence is the idea that we're constantly making incremental improvements, but it's really that destination we never quite reach because the client's needs are always changing. And the institution is always changing. So just really having that frame of reference that it's not a destination, but it's more of a journey.
Yeah, and looking at that journey as a series of problems or series of problem-solving exercises, I think that's a nice way to look at it, and hopefully we can get some of that going in the three systems.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, Tomika, you can certainly give me sort of more feedback. I'm already thinking about this. This is the first time I've really put some focused thought into this. I don't know if you noticed that, but I'm going to be thinking a lot about this weekend, and we can talk on Monday or Tuesday before we go in and do this. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, Tomika, thanks for calling in. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, bye-bye. All right, so that's Tomika on there. Let me go back and see. All right, so that was good, right? Like I said, I appreciate you guys' help in having me sort of think through that a little bit and how that works. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable already. I might actually get some sleep in the next few nights and thinking about this. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break or 6-minute break this time. So we're going to have 25 after. Let's come back up and we'll pick up the more seam stuff and sort of finish out